Hello English 1 students. I'm going to take you guys through this warm-up and then I'm going to take you through the beginning of this lesson, alright? So at this point you should have already highlighted your short answer response and read it in your warm-up, and you should have scored it actually as well on the bottom of this paper. So if you notice on my warm-up, my first sentence is highlighted in pink, just like the key at the bottom tells me, because this is my topic sentence. It's my answer to the question. The reason I know that this is my topic sentence or my answer to the question is when I look in it, I can see that the words from the question are actually directly in this sentence. I also see that there are two association words which are my answer to the question. Romeo feels impressionable by Juliet's feelings, and he feels conflicted on whether he's going to tell her that he is there or not. So this is actually an SAR that we've already written about the balcony scene. All right? Then the next part of the key in the middle / bottom of that page is orange transitions. So the next sentence starts with the words "to be clear." We know that that is our transition into our clarification sentence. So you can see that I've highlighted it in orange. A good way to find your transitions is all of your transitions should have a comma at the end of them. Alright, so it says "to be clear," and then in blue I have highlighted my clarification to my answer, which is that Romeo feels credulous and tentative. Now I know that these are big words, so I will show us what that means here in a second. Alright, so he feels credulous and tentative. Then I see this, for example, I notice that there's a comma on the side or at the end of it, so I know that that's also a transition, therefore it is highlighted in orange. Then I see this word "when." So when Juliet appeared on the balcony, Romeo speaks of his love for her only to himself in an aside, saying. That is all leading into my evidence. It's introducing what's going on before just plopping my quote in there. So this should be highlighted in purple because it's that lead in to the text evidence. The next part of that sentence is the actual text evidence, and I see that there are quotation marks there, so that is highlighted in green. This is my evidence 1 sentence. So actually we could probably label this evidence 1, and we can go to this side and label our clarification sentence and our topic sentence. All right? Then when I go down and I continue after the quote, I see the words "the fact that." Those words should indicate to me that this is a commentary 1 because it's following my evidence 1. So I'm commentating on this quote and explaining how this quote then relates to my answer up here. All right, so it says the fact that Romeo's vulnerable expression erupts upon seeing Juliet from afar reveals that his emotions are susceptible to Juliet's presence. So that is an explanation, and so it is in yellow. Then I see a word with a comma at the end, and the word is at the beginning of the sentence, so that is another transition. I see the word "when" again, and then it says when Juliet expresses her feelings, so it's introducing me to what is going on in the story before giving me a quote. So that's my lead in to text evidence again. Then I see my quote in there. I have the quotation marks, so I highlight that in green because that is my text evidence. This then becomes my evidence 2 sentence. Next, I see the fact that, again, which is keying me or cluing me into the fact that this is an explanation of my quote. So the fact that he's talking to himself illustrates his hesitation in making his presence known. So that's in yellow because it's explaining the quote. Okay, and that's my C2. Now I highlighted my "if" in orange. If you did not do that, that is okay, but I felt like that's a transition into another form of thinking. If yours is in blue, that's okay. You do not need to change it, all right? So I have "if Romeo was more courageous and forthright, he would feel comfortable making his presence and affection known for Juliet first without the knowledge of reciprocation." So this is clarifying my answer, so that would be in blue, all right? Now this last sentence I see, it says, in conclusion, again, there's a comma there at the end of that, so I know that this is a transition, but this isn't following the structure of our SAR. That's okay. This sentence is also explaining our answer here in the topic sentence. So if you highlighted this sentence in blue or you highlighted it in yellow, that is acceptable because it is an explanation or a clarification of the answer. All right? So now I'm going to switch over to the slideshow. And here you can see some of those words that we might not be familiar with. All right? So the first word we might not be familiar with is impressionable. Impressionable means someone that's easily influenced or persuaded. The second word we might not know is the word credulous, which means someone is too trusting or gullible. The third word is tentative, which means unsure or unsteady. Hesitant is another word for tentative. Then we have the word vulnerable, which means to be helpless or defenseless. Susceptible is a synonym or another way to say vulnerable. So someone who is vulnerable or helpless or maybe open to something. Then we have the word forthright, which means direct, outspoken. They are straightforward. The last word is circumstantial, which means that they depend on what's going on. It's circumstantial. It depends on the situation. Okay? So I'm going to bring us back to the document. And I'm going to take us to the bottom part here with that rubric. Now you can see that I have scored it a 3. So you should have also scored this a 3. Now I'm going to explain to you why it's a 3, all right? If I start here with the 1, it says that the answer does not answer the question. When I say answer, I'm talking about my topic sentence. So I'm going to go into that topic sentence and make sure that it answers the question. Well, we've already said that this has all of the words in the question in the answer, which is awesome because that means I'm directly answering the question. Then I see that I have 2 associations, not just one, but I talk about both of his feelings. He is impressionable on Juliet's feelings. The way she feels impresses him and maybe can change his mind. He's also conflicted because he doesn't know if he wants to let Juliet know that he is there. So these 2 feelings are both what he is feeling. I don't just give one, which means this is a really strong topic sentence, all right? So it wouldn't be a 1. When I go to 2, it says that the answer to the question is weak, and I'm not quite sure I agree with that, but I'm going to look at the next part of the rubric on 2 and 3 just to make sure. So you see that 2 says text evidence is present, but it doesn't always support the argument. So I'm going to go in and look. I know that I have 2 pieces of text evidence because they're here in green. The first piece of text evidence says, it is my lady, oh, it is my love, oh, that she knew she were. All right, and I notice that he's saying this in aside. And in the aside, that's only to himself. Now, he is standing there, and he could easily tell Juliet that she is his love, that he loves her. But he chooses only to tell himself, which means he is waiting to hear how Juliet feels. He is impressionable or could be influenced by her feelings. So this does prove this association of impressionable. The next quote is, should I listen for more or should I speak now? Now that quote is supporting this idea of being conflicted. He doesn't know if he should tell Juliet that he is there or if he should continue to listen to her and get more insight or more information on how she feels. So both of these quotes do support the topic sentence or the answer. So I'm not really sure that this is a 2. I can really determine that this is not a 2 with this next part where it says explanation of text evidence because it says that the text evidence only explains the literal meaning. When I look at 3, not only is the text evidence present and supporting the argument, but it discusses the literal and the figurative meaning. When I see this word figurative, I'm really talking about those associations. All right? So figurative is associations. And so when I go into these commentary sentences, I notice that in my commentary sentences, I have multiple association words. All right? Those multiple association words are showing that figurative meaning. I'm going beyond the literal of what's being said in the quote, and I'm explaining why that has a deeper meaning or what that deeper meaning is. So the fact that he says, oh, if she knew she were, shows that he's vulnerable. He's afraid to share his own feelings, even though when he sees her, that's what he feels. He's also far away, which shows that he's not going to go close to her, and that his feelings are susceptible or vulnerable or can be changed based off of how Juliet's feeling. Then, when I'm explaining my second quote, I see that he talks about his hesitation in making his presence known. He's conflicted and he's hesitant. He's slow to make this decision because he's not sure if he wants to listen for more or if he wants to speak up. All right, so this is definitely a 3 on the rubric for an SAR. It has a strong and appropriate answer with multiple associations. All right, so those 2 associations makes this a level 3. All right, so now what I want us to do is I want us to turn the page to the teacher model, okay? We're gonna look at an SAR that looks very similar to some of the SARs we have seen from students in English 1. And, you know, we're still at the beginning of the year, so we're still learning how to do this, but there are some common mistakes that we make when we are writing on our SAR. And the key to these mistakes is we need to know how to fix them. So by the end of today, you will end up fixing your own SAR from your test or your quiz last week. But we need to show you how do you fix it, how do you revise it. So let's say this is my SAR on my quiz, all right? The first step is I need to go back and I need to make sure that I have all of these things that we highlighted for in our warm-up, all right? So I'm going to do that and I want you all to do it with me. The first thing that I need to highlight, again, with pink highlighter, is my argument or my topic sentence. So I'm going to take out my pink highlighter, I highlight the pink part, and then I'm going to highlight that first sentence because that is my answer. So the first sentence says, I think that the stage directions in the balcony scene reveal that Romeo feels conflicted. I know that that's my answer because I see the word stage directions in both the question and that sentence. I see the balcony scene in the question and the sentence. I see the word reveal. I know that it's chosen Romeo. I see the word feels, okay? Then I'm going to move on to my orange. And I'm just going to scan here for my transitions. So I do see the to be clear with the comma at the end of it, so I'm going to highlight that. I don't really think because is a transition, so I'm not going to highlight that. I do see the word however with a comma on the end of it, so I am going to highlight that. And if you would like, you can highlight that if. All right, the next part is purple. So the purple is the lead into the text evidence. So I'm going to look here. I see my to be clear sentence, so I'm going to kind of move past that, and I see this word because, and then I see Juliet appears on the balcony. Romeo only talks to himself about his feelings for her. All right, this Juliet appears on the balcony is definitely explaining what's going on in the story at that time, but everything else is kind of extra. It's kind of just there. All right, and then I don't see a quote in there either. I'm going to go down and see if I can find a quote. So I do see a quote down here, And if I look ahead of that in that sentence, I see that word when that I liked in that first SAR that we saw in the warm-up. So I'm going to highlight when Romeo hears Juliet expressing her feelings toward him. That is definitely part of an introduction or a lead-in to a quote. But then this part is not a quote. All right? So I'm not going to highlight that yet. The next part is to highlight text evidence in green. All right? So I'm going to go in and highlight that one quote that I've seen. Now, there is not a second quote in here, so I'm just going to highlight that section. Next, I see yellow for the explanation of the text. All right? So I don't really see the word the fact that in here. I'm just going to kind of have to look, and I'm seeing it right there. So the fact that Romeo keeps his feelings to himself shows how he is conflicted about sharing his feelings with Juliet. So that is an explanation of a quote, but there is no quote there that they're explaining. So I do know that I'm going to have to add that in. Then I see the however, when, I see the quote, and I see this shows how he is conflicted and doesn't want to interrupt her, but it's probably missing that first half of that sentence, and we'll go back and fix some of this later. The next thing we need to highlight is blue. It's actually the last thing we need to highlight. So I'm going to do blue. To be clear, I'm going to finish this clarification sentence. He feels conflicted about letting Juliet know he's there. And then my if sentence is also a clarification of my answer, so that Romeo was confident and spoke up to Juliet, he wouldn't feel so conflicted. All right. So I noticed that there's some extra stuff in here, and there's also some stuff missing. So I just want us to see what this would be graded like on the rubric, and then we're going to go in and we're going to fix it. All right, so if we drop down to the rubric at the bottom of this page, let's look at it and score it. One says that the answer does not, ooh, dropped my pen there. One says that the answer does not answer the question. Well, if I go up here and look at my topic sentence, my answer is answering the question. I have the word stage directions, all right? I am recognizing that it's specifically in the balcony scene, what feelings it's revealing and what character. And I have this word conflicted. We haven't boxed in our association words yet, so we'll kind of do that as we go. So I have this word conflicted, which is fine. He does feel conflicted. It's only one of his feelings. So although it's not a 1 because it does answer the question, and this one says it does not, I feel like it might be a little bit weaker than the one we saw before when it had multiple association words, okay? So this one could kind of go either way, but I'm going to look at the text evidence now and see where it might fall. So if I go up here, I say, to be clear, Romeo feels conflicted about letting Juliet know he's there. Well, that's the same word. And in my clarification sentence, I need to clarify or explain my answer. And if I use the same word, I'm not doing that. If I continue into the next sentence, it says, because Juliet appears on the balcony, he only talks to himself about his feelings for her. Well, that doesn't explain anything to me. My next sentence, the fact that Romeo keeps his feelings to himself shows how conflicted, again, same word, not really showing me much depth or meaning about sharing his feelings with Juliet. However, when Romeo hears Juliet expressing her feeling towards him, Romeo doesn't speak up and talk to her. Should I speak now? Shows he is conflicted. Again, the same word, all right? And I do have one piece of evidence here. Now, the evidence does show how he is conflicted, the should I speak now part, but it's explained again with that same word. So when I go down to this rubric, it says text evidence is present but doesn't always support the argument. It does, but it's not necessarily clear on how it supports the argument. Also, there's only one piece of text evidence, and here I have 2, which is what we need. Also, when I look into the explanation of the evidence, this says it just discusses the literal meaning, and here we're talking about the figurative meaning. Because I only use the word conflicted in this SAR, I am really only addressing the literal meaning. I'm not going beyond that. I just keep repeating the same thing. So it's not showing depth of understanding, which means that this would be a 2 on the rubric, all right? I do have a different association word here in my if sentence. I say if Romeo was confident and spoke up, he wouldn't feel so conflicted, but then again, I am using that word conflicted. So we don't want to get too repetitive with our SARs. Let's go in and talk about how we would revise this to make it better and push it to a 3 on the rubric, all right? So I go into my topic sentence. It's not as strong as the topic sentence in the warm-up. A couple reasons. The first reason is this I think that. You do not ever want to start your answer with the words I think that, all right? It is not academically correct, and it's not very strong because the person reading your essay might not care what you think. And so starting your essay or your SAR with I think that is pretty weak. The other part of this short answer response topic sentence that we want to improve is that we only have one association word in it. So we can add the word influenced. He's conflicted and influenced. So he's conflicted about announcing his presence to Juliet and making his feelings known. We could add the word influenced here. By Juliet. So instead it says, the stage directions in the balcony scene reveal that Romeo feels influenced by Juliet and conflicted about announcing his presence to Juliet and making his feelings known. All right, the to be clear is perfect. I like that it has the comma at the end of it, so I'm going to keep that the same. But then when I continue on into my clarification sentence, again, I use that word conflicted, and we talked about how that repetitiveness actually takes away from the depth of understanding in the SAR. So it doesn't show me or anyone else reading this SAR that you really understand why Romeo is conflicted. So instead of using the word conflicted, we're going to use a synonym that we saw in the SAR in the do now. We're going to use the word tentative. He is tentative about letting Juliet know he is there. That makes this clarification sentence a lot stronger. Now, when we go into this next sentence, we do not want to start it with the word because. That is really weak and not actually grammatically correct, okay? So we're going to take out the word because, and we're going to start it with that word when. So when Juliet appears on the balcony, Romeo, and then we have this only talks to himself about his feelings for her. Now we know this only talks to himself part really means that it's an aside. So Romeo, I'm going to put in his aside, and I'm going to cross out that because I want to use the actual stage directions that shows my depth of understanding, that I know what the stage directions are. So in his aside, reveals, and I need to add in my quote. So I'm just going to pull the same quote from the SAR in the do now. So he reveals, oh, she is my love. I'm going to end my quote there. All right? So that then makes this a proper evidence sentence because I have a real piece of evidence. I have a quote. Then I have the fact that Romeo keeps his feelings to himself shows how he is conflicted. So everything up until conflicted is okay. Again, I'm just repeating myself, which does not show I actually understand why he's conflicted. So shows maybe that he's concerned or worried about sharing his feelings with Juliet. Then I have this transition, which is good that I have a transition there, but the transition says, however, when Romeo hears Juliet expressing her feelings towards him, he doesn't speak up and talk to her. Now, he wasn't speaking up and talking to her up here, so this is actually the same idea, and however is showing an opposite idea. So I need to change this to a more appropriate transition, and something that would be more appropriate would be in addition. So in addition, when Romeo hears Juliet expressing her feelings towards him, we already said he doesn't speak up, and because he's not actually talking and he's in his head, I'm just going to shorten this and say he wonders, should I speak now? And then that can be the end of that evidence sentence. But I cannot start my next sentence with shows how he is conflicted. That would be a dependent clause or a fragment, so that wouldn't work. So I need to restart that sentence, and I want to start it the same way I started my commentary sentence up here. So I'm going to add the fact that, all right? And I'm going to take this idea here. He doesn't speak up. Shows how he is conflicted. Again, I need to get rid of conflicted and change it to something else. So maybe shows how he is hesitant. And then it says, and doesn't want to interrupt her. Now, I don't think that the reason he's not speaking up is that he would interrupt her. I think that the reason he's not speaking up is because he wants to hear how she feels before he tells her how he feels, right? So I'm going to say, and he doesn't want to speak up, so he's hesitant to tell her how he feels before knowing her feelings. Okay? And I can end that there. I'm going to get rid of this doesn't want to interrupt her. Then I have my if, which is perfect. So I'm going to say if he was confident, that's good, because if he was confident, he would have spoke up to Juliet. He wouldn't feel so conflicted. Again, get rid of conflicted and let's change it to something else. So I'm going to use the word vulnerable. He wouldn't feel so vulnerable. And instead, he would have shared his feelings with Juliet before having to hear hers. All right? Now this looks kind of messy. And so when we revise something, this is the first step to revising it, but then we have to write it out nice and neat so it's easier to read and understand. All right, so I'm going to turn the page, and on this next page, I have written out my new SAR, all nice and neat, really pretty, so that it's easy to read and understand. The first thing that I want you to do is I want you to go through your SAR on your packet for your quiz, and I want you to highlight all of the things that we've been highlighting today. Once you have done that, I want you to go ahead and score yourself. Don't revise yet, just score how you wrote on the quiz. Then you're going to explain why you got that score. Once you have completed that, you're going to write out your revision. All right, if you have any questions, just raise your hand, refer back to these notes, and good luck.